In this presentation, you will learn about thick description. The American anthropologist Clifford Geertz articulated the position that all ethnography involved multiple acts of interpretation. In Geertz's view, interpretation was not an anthropologist's unverifiable opinion of another culture's motives and actions, but rather an informed exposition of how those motives and actions were meaningful in a specific cultural context. Geertz's position was formalized in a 1973 essay, Thick Description Toward an Interpretive Theory of Culture, in which he argues that man is an animal suspended in webs of significance he himself has spun, and I take culture to be those webs, and the analysis of it to be therefore not an experimental science in search of law, but an interpretive one in search of meaning. In his first chapter in the Interpretation of Cultures, Clifford Geertz discusses the role of the ethnographer. Broadly, the ethnographer's aim is to observe, record, and analyze a culture. More specifically, he or she must interpret signs to gain their meaning within the culture itself. This interpretation must be based on the thick description of a sign in order to see all the possible meanings. His example of a wink of an eye clarifies this point. When a man winks, he is merely rapidly contracting his right eyelid, or he is practicing a burlesque of a friend faking a wink to deceive an innocent into thinking conspiracy is in motion. Ultimately, Geertz hopes that the ethnographer's deeper understanding of the signs will open and or increase the dialogue among different cultures. As an anthropologist, Geertz was first and foremost interested in ethnography. However, he was frustrated by what he saw as the many surface level readings of culture that some anthropologists were producing. Why was this an issue? Simply put, Geertz recognized that culture is knotty, which simply means complicated, and often mysterious thing made up of layers upon layers of intertwined symbols and signs. This means that culture is not an easy thing to define, and it is even harder to describe. To help anthropologists in the task of defining their cultural object of study, Geertz introduced the concept of thick description into this discipline. The term can be described as detailed account of field experiences in which the researcher makes explicit the patterns of cultural and social relationships and puts them in context. An example, the multivalence of a wink. To make better sense of what thick description entails, Geertz explained it with an example. Consider two boys rapidly contracting the eyelids of their right eyes. In one, this is an involuntary twitch. In the other, a conspirational signal to a friend. The two movements are, as movements, identical. From an I am a camera phenomenistic observation of them alone, one could not tell which was twitch and which was wink, or indeed whether both or either was twitch or wink. Yet the difference, however unphotographical, between a twitch and a wink is vast, as anyone unfortunate enough to have had the first taken for the second knows. The winker is communicating, and indeed communicating in a quite precise and special way. Contracting your eyelids on purpose when there exists a public code in which doing counts as a conspirational signal is winking. That's all there is to it. A speck of behavior, a fleck of culture, and voila, a gesture. That, however, is just the beginning. Suppose he continues. There is a third boy who, to give malicious amusement to his cronies, parodies the first boy's wink as amateurish, clumsy, obvious, and so on. He, of course, does this in the same way the second boy winked and the first twitched, by contracting his right eyelid. Only this boy is neither winking nor twitching. He is parodying someone else, where we simply mean he is imitating someone else, as he takes it laughable attempt at winking. Here too a socially established code exists. The point is that between what Ryle calls the thin description of what the researcher is doing and the thick description of what he is doing, where the object of ethnography lies. A stratified hierarchy of meaning structures in terms of twitches, winks, fake winks, parodies, rehearsals of parodies are produced, perceived, and interpreted, and without which they would not, in fact, exist, no matter what anyone did or didn't do with his eyelids. Geats provides us with a perfect example of a behavior that can only be explicated by thick description. The three boys, the winker, the twitcher, and the parodist, are all doing the same physical action. But given the socio-cultural context that each boy finds himself in, the exact same behavior can mean vastly different things. Geats argues that it is this detailed context that the ethnographer must dig into and discover if one wants to adequately explain behavior and extension culture. In summation, Geats is quoted as saying, "Culture is context," and this utterance helps understand what exactly he is getting at when he discusses thick description. Victor Turner utilized the model of thick description as developed by Geats, but integrated it with Van Gennep's model of rites of passage and used his new theory as a means to understand the development of the 60s counterculture and the experience of individuals at countercultural protests and festivals such as Woodstock or the Stonewall riots in the New York gay community. He also reconstructed structural functionalist models of social cohesion to incorporate the role of social movements, ethnic groups, and disenfranchised minorities within the context of broader society. To a large extent, Turner brought the practice of anthropology into contemporary industrialized society and out of the realm of remote pre-industrial communities abroad. In doing so, he brought about a major revaluation of the traditional theoretical models upon which anthropology had been based. To resolve the tensions between his love of science and the humanities, he studied anthropology at university, a discipline that could enable him to explore both the science of culture and human behavior and the role of aesthetic symbolism and meaning in society. He also felt that anthropology could permit him to explore the role of social dramas and human interaction, an area he loved in literature and theatre, in a practical context. To this end, he criticized arguments that the practice of anthropology necessarily implied the objectification and thus oppression of their subjects of research. Though he acknowledged that it did sometimes occur, he felt that post-colonial critique of anthropologists misunderstood the nature of an anthropologist's engagement with a community. He argued that when an anthropologist, and often his or her family, lives in the field with the community for 1 or 3 years, they become involved in complex interactions with the community, and he defines this as social drama. In particular, an anthropologist becomes part of the social and cultural life of the community rather than an objective, disinterested figure that can be kept distinct from the complex social and cultural interactions that happen around him or her. Understanding the role of social dramas, personal characteristics, and level of meaning implicit in a conversation as experienced by the anthropologist as a participant in that society are extremely important areas of research. Each culture, each person within it, uses the entire sensory repertoire to convey messages. Manual gesticulation, which simply means gestures, facial expressions, bodily postures, rapid, heavy or light breathing, tears at the individual level, and stylized gestures, dance patterns, prescribed silences, synchronized movements such as marching, the moves and plays of games, sports, and rituals at the cultural level. However, he did not want to abandon the principles of science, but he wanted to apply scientific method to new areas of research in human condition. He used the principles of structural functionalism, kinship, class, and power relationships, but he wanted to bring individual character, personal style, skill at speech making, personal choice, power of symbols in communication, and the emotive or feeling content of human interaction. In short, he wanted to ground anthropology as a social science in the context of personal lived experience and emotional or spiritual significance. In contrast to Geets, who argued that social meaning could be interpreted as a text, Turner argued that a better analogy for making sense of culture is perceiving social interactions as a kind of theater. Thank you for watching the presentation. Do like, subscribe, share, and leave your comments about this presentation or any other topics you would like to learn more about.